place to do
3,
more.
2, 1. We are recording. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Hell in a Handbasket. I do believe this would be episode 6. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nunya.
Yes, it is.
All right, and here we have, as you guys can see, there's a third party among us. It is my excellent cat. No, sorry, it is Shadowi.
Hello,
So,
everybody.
how is it going? Yes, like he is another regular face on DPA Open Mic, and he had the time to come on, so we were excited to get another panelist to see how it goes. But yeah,
so for people who don't follow DPA Open Mic, Shadowi, why don't you give us a little intro of yourself?
Yes, I'm from France, and basically I decided to follow the open mic. 2 years ago, maybe something like that.
Wow, it's been that long.
For me, it was at first a way to train my English speaking ability because honestly, I need it, and I hope today I'm better than before. And today it's an occasion to follow the news in the world and to understand better, to have a better understanding about how everything is working.
Your English is better than my French, so let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
Well, in a way, Shadowi brought up kind of what the first question that I kind of would have had, that kind of what I want to ask him. So we got a new face here. Is how did you get red pilled? What is your red pill moment? How did you get involved in alternative media, in doing alternative news, besides
In fact,
English
for
practice?
me, I think there is 2 events which very important about my the fact that I follow the news a lot. The first one was the Romania Revolution in '89. I was very young, and it was the first time I followed an event in live on radio channel. Was decided to be created at this time, France Info, and they basically it's a news 100% news, 24 days, 24 hours a day. And I follow this revolution, this media for the first time. And since this time, I followed a lot of things in the world, mostly international stuff. And specifically for the open mic and the alternative mainstream media, it was the Ukraine war. Because at first, I was supporting Ukraine, the small guy against the big one. The invader was obviously Russia. But very soon, very early, I understand that basically every time someone wanted to defend Ukraine was speaking, he was lying to me. Everything the Ukrainian supporting people, when they were talking, they were lying. Russia, they were talking a lot less at the beginning of the war. So there were a lot less lies. So for me, it was like that.
Really
I decided basically to follow the direction where there was less bullshit.
So first question I kind of have is when would you say that you started following the war then? Like for you, when does that?
Day one. The war day one.
Like February of 2022?
Yes.
Okay.
At first I was following it on the Institute for the Study of Wars. Before I understand what it was really. You have a very nice map, very good understanding for what I think of the situation. Yeah, but today I understand it was just propaganda.
Well, even other mappers will use Institute for Study of Wars material just because, like you said, it's so slick. The presentation is right, is spot on for a lot of this stuff. Victoria Newland knows how to make a good
way more than Pro-Russian, Pro-Ukrainian.
Yeah,
so creating the Ukrainian policy.
So you noticed that you were getting lied to more, and would you say that you were following from the French speaking media? Because one thing I noticed
French media are very bad for this situation. There is one channel that I follow in France. It was the official French Army headquarters. They published every week a report on the Ukrainian wars, and it was very fact. Only the real news, We have spot something here, spot something here, and there is no bullshit basically, but very, very few information because they publish only things where they were sure about. So
Well, I find that we all have very similar stories in that we eventually just got fed up with the mainstream media in our respective countries because we realized that we were being lied to, and that's because of social media, right? Like, you can't tell me not to see something that my eyes just saw on X. You know what I mean? And the last, I'll say, 10 years, there's just been more and more and more and more of that. It's like you see something on X or on Telegram, and it's all right there. It's the video, it's, audio, whatever it may be. It is definitive evidence. And then you'll turn around on mainstream media and, they'll be refuting it if they need to refute it. Right. And you can't reconcile because your own eyes are seeing this stuff. And I think for a lot of people, the rise of social media as a platform for how people get their news has really done a number on the mainstream media, has really done a number on the deep state, because they can't control the narrative anymore. There's too many people like the three of us who just eventually said, no, like I can't turn a blind eye to what I'm seeing as being true, and there's so many of us now that I really struggle to see who still follows mainstream media, to be honest with you. Old people. That's it.
In France, there is a specific event who make the people understand the situation about the mainstream media. It was a Yellow Jacket situation. It was before the COVID, a few years ago. And basically, there's a lot of people in the street, and everybody knows someone who was in the street protesting. So everybody on the ground have a very clear understanding of the situation. But the mainstream media, especially the BFM TV, with a full-time channel network, they decided to lie about the situation, to downplay things, to try to make us believe that the situation was not bad, but not so bad, to make us believe that the numbers of protesters were not so large, and so on. It was at a point where the journalists from this media has to hide themselves when they wanted to go on the ground, because people were basically throwing stuff to their teams every time they were showing. And I think it was in France, at least, the event where a lot of people understand that BFM TV and the mainstream media were just bullshit.
But that wasn't your kind of red pill moment, to use the terminology you had, because what's interesting is that you said that your first sort of, geopolitical awakening moment, it was in 1989, so even somebody like you who is an experienced, news nerd, the Ukraine war sort of forced you towards the alternative media. So you're already somebody that was probably in the top maybe 1% of news consumers.
Yes, of course.
To be
I'm
doing
following
that
international news, so immediately I'm a very small percentage of the population.
Yeah, and still for you, once the Ukraine war came around, you said that you were still it took you a while to come around to understanding a more holistic picture of exactly the conflict and what was going on.
I think before the Ukrainian war, I was thinking that the mainstream media, at least the BFM TV and things like that, were just a very, very low quality. Basically, they were just bad. Okay? After Ukraine, it was clear for me, at least, that they have a political agenda. They wanted to do propaganda. Before that, honestly, it could just be they were not so skillful as a journalist. They were just maybe bad journalists.
It's interesting that you say that you've all but given up on French mainstream media, because for me, as somebody who tries to keep an eye on, different propaganda narratives as far as I can kind of find them, so try to follow everybody's media as much as for stories that interest me and as much as I can. One thing that really appreciated with the French media is that there were times where even on the mainstream or sometimes on the peripheries, some small newspaper somewhere came out there and just said stuff that other people were not willing to say. Like one thing that comes to mind is in Bucha. So there was a French journalist that said that, yeah, they did this whole tour where they didn't allow you to go around wherever you wanted. You had to go on like a scenic route so that they would control what it is that you're seeing. And he talked about seeing bodies being moved and mannequins as well. So like you didn't hear that from anybody. The only places that talked about that were like the Russians and there was that one story that the French did.
Don't forget something. The French police sent the special team to analyze the corpse from Bucha, and they should have made a report a few months later. Nobody speak about the report.
See, that's
everybody speak about the fact that they're sending a team, but a few months later, everything disappears.
Yeah, right. Because you know what? I will tell you, if there was a massacre on that level, there would be overwhelming evidence. It would be impossible to hide.
And they still would be speaking about it today.
Yeah, so the reason, like the French going out there and even having,
especially in this day and age, like everybody's got a phone. You can't hide that in this day and age.
Yeah,
right?
That's how I figured it out right away. That Bucha was a fake was because of the on the ground stuff, like all the on the ground videos. It's just nothing matched up and made sense. And then you look at the stories, and it was all in concert, in unison, everybody with overwhelming, narrative force was seeing the same exact thing, and it like with a lot of these stories, with like almost all of these stories, if you take a look at, what are the sources? They usually share the same sources. You can look at the documents that they used to come to that conclusion. But, everybody, it doesn't matter for the casual news consumer. They're looking at all of the headlines, and it looks huge and overwhelming. Go ahead, Shadowi.
For me, one of the main indicators of this kind of situation is when the authority of some kind send an investigation team to have a report, and we never heard about the report. Mm-hmm. Everybody speak about the team who go to make the investigation. Most of the time, they are very serious people, very professional, a very excellent guy, certainly. But the report disappeared. No one speak about it.
But
when you have this kind of situation, mainly it's the first information is just bullshit.
Yeah, but this is what I mean, is that I give the French a little bit of credit for that, because you had the New York Times also did a report where they sent investigators and they did underground investigation, and so did PBS, public service.
But they didn't speak about this kind of investigation. I speak about professional people to analyze cops, policemen who works. What's the word? When there is a victim of a crime.
Yeah, forensic evidence.
Forensic teams, professional forensic teams who have been sent there to analyze cops. Basically, it's a work was going to last a few months.
But they didn't lie.
Very scientific
That's
stuff.
what I mean. Think about Aleppo. In Aleppo, there was that a chemical so-called bombing. When it came out that the reports were cooked and that the original report was buried and that people lost their jobs and there was like whistleblowers, we buried that shit, right? But the French didn't do that for Bucha. That's what I mean. Like it's like they allowed a little bit to seep through, a little bit to leak through. And it feels like,
really?
Yeah, there's still captured media, but it's not nearly as bad as Germany. Like Germany is completely beyond repair, I think. There's no reason to read German propaganda.
You have no idea.
There's still reasons to read French propaganda here and there, but not German, for example.
For information, I'm following one French media to understand what's happening in the country. Basically, it's a free one, so very low quality. But the use of this newspaper, that is for me, is to understand what the people are thinking, what interests people at the lowest level. You know, the free information newspapers, it's very low level, low quality, but it allows you to understand uh, the basic mainstream media. And the other news channel I follow is the Washington Post,
Okay.
because if for the US policies, they are very bad. They are basically just pro-democrat, and they are very blind about Republican policy. But for international news, they are very good. They are the first one to criticize Ukraine and things like that.
Yeah, I don't think Washington Post is the worst. I mean, they're all pretty bad, but you should be. I feel like you should be reading them. I think what's dropped off in my lifetime, what's dropped off a cliff is the New York Times. It's gone from paper of record to being something that's like, ooh, everybody can see the decline.
Well, maybe it's always been that way, and we're just getting smarter. That's what I think.
Really? No,
I think the New York Times, the WAPO, all those papers, in the UK, the Telegraph or whatever.
Nunia, when you think that, try to remember the Watergate.
No, I get it. Watergate was 50 years ago.
The newspaper situation and the low quality for the news, at least, came from the 90s and the end of the 90s. Basically,
no, I agree with you.
When the very wealthy guy began to buy back the newspapers, since with internet, the value has dropped, basically.
Yeah, that's kind of one of our, I think maybe our first episode where we sort of discussed that, where it feels like there is a little bit of freedom in the media, and then it was consolidated, and then people were able to get a little bit more freedom in the media that was consolidated, and now there's this alternative media, almost like a flowering of alternative media spring, and I have no doubt that it's going to also get cramped as well, which is why I always say it, we really got to consider branching out to other platforms as well, because YouTube is really bad about this stuff,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
recently DD Geopolitics, Rachel Blevins, and what was the third, and Glenn Deason were taken offline, and they allowed them back online, most likely because of Glenn Deason. I think they realized they overstepped with him, because people that aren't aware, Glenn Deason is like just a straight up just Norwegian scholar of like Russian affairs. So he's really dry material. He talks to other scholars about really dry, anachronistic scholarly things, like the philosophical origins of liberalism, and how it contrasts with fascism and communism, or something like this. Like he really goes off on those kinds of tangents. And so when they got rid of him as well, I think that there was a little bit of a backlash. Even on Twitter, people were going like, "Are you freaking kidding me? You're going to take these guys offline?" And so I
have a good one for you. At the point I was following at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the Indian media WION. It was very interesting because it was the point of view of India.
Mm-hmm.
Very good news channel, and they basically decided to publish on their website a Lavrov speech, and they take it from CNN, from the YouTube CNN channel. And for publishing a Lavrov speech, they have been banned from YouTube. But they are an Indian official private, but a through channel. Okay, immediately YouTube will save 5 million complaints.
Did they bring him back?
Immediately, yes, in 3 days. Imagine 5 million complaints for media they never heard about, because it's India. India, it's like China.
Yeah.
There is so huge population, so much people, so such population that everything is very large, and immediately the report system has crashed down in India for YouTube. It was very impressive.
Yeah, well, see, Indian media is a mixed bag, where there's a lot of stuff that's worth watching and a lot of garbage that's not worth watching.
And they are very nationalist. You cannot follow India news to understand India's situation or Pakistan situation. It's impossible.
Yeah. You expect them to be, well, what it feels like is once it gets to domestic issues or Pakistan or China, it feels like a lot of it goes down to the lowest common denominator. Because like when it comes to the Ukraine war, for example, the Indian audience, I think, was primed to have a more nuanced understanding of that situation, where you could be like, this is a continuation of a history that they have a better understanding of than, for example, the Americans.
Imagine this channel has sent a journalist in Kiev.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
They
right.
had
They even
such
had, and not only that, they
way
had
that
people
they
on the
were
front
able to
lines.
send people in foreign country. This was
Mhm.
very good channel.
Yeah, no, they had people on the front lines. I think they were the only foreign country to have people on front lines on both sides, which was an interesting thing. So that kind of stuff, right, gave them a leg up, where a lot of it is English language, and I say that's the stuff that's really blown up the most. There's been a couple of faces that have blown up as well. You have the hosts of some of these big channels. You have some of the analysts that show up. So they've kind of had a little bit of a bloom, but I think that so the Indian audience was a little bit more primed to be able to understand a little bit of these nuances versus the issues that are more close to home. They're just going to go for that least common denominator approach, where they're just like, China bad. Oh, right now China bad, but still kind of good right now. Okay, now this is the official line, so we know where we're at. Pakistan, of course, always bad. You try to make it, you just dumb it down. Like those issues, they're not the ones that you can rely, I think, on Indian propaganda to be nuanced about. They have a hard line about Pakistan,
Oh, yes.
So,
it's always the same thing. If I want information about US policy, I'm not going to read the Washington Post. I'm going to read the India's media. If I want news about Pakistan and India, I could read the Washington Post.
yeah, I don't know. I think that the way that I look at it is all of the news. Doesn't matter if I'm reading the Washington Post,
No.
I
I
can
promise you,
rely on
really.
it to be like,
All the newspapers have some kind of blind side about their own issue. Of course, for the US
yes,
newspapers, it's the US situation.
but more
But
than blindside. I
if
agree
you
with you.
want to understand the political situation in USA, you could follow Al Jazeera, India Wayon,
Right.
or some kind of newspapers. You are
But
going to understand
I
a
want to
lot of
respond
things.
to that. I want to
But
respond to
if you try to follow Al Jazeera to understand the Qatari situation, it's bullshit, of course.
Right. Well, I think that more than relying on newspapers to have blind spots, I think that you can rely on them to push certain narratives, to
Yes.
have a certain perspective that they want to peddle, as the one that is that they are sympathetic to, right? And when that happens, then even if somebody's reporting as objectively as they can, it seeps through in the language. And I think that when you read things like the Washington Post or the New York Post, the New York Times, it's important to be able to understand what their what is it that they're going to say about this kind of stuff in general. What is it that these guys in general say about
I
this?
just want to add, for me, there is a really difference between Washington Post and New York Times. New York Times is really bad every time for everything. Washington Post for me is way better.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, in general, it doesn't matter. Even if I'm reading Russian news, for example, right? I know I'm reading Russian propaganda. I'm not under no illusions that I'm reading. I could say, okay, well, like Nunya always likes to say, okay, well, if you want to get a better picture, read trade journals. That's true, but it's also important to read the palatable news that's there for the casual news consumer too, because you understand what it is what's the official line.
I think we could summarize all of this, but if you want information, if you want news, you have to look for it.
Yeah.
If you stay passive and if you wait, you are going to have nothing or very bad quality stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, really,
you need to put in the work. Like, if you want to be informed in this day and age, given all the various platforms and all the various conflicting narratives that are out there, you need to, if you want to be informed, you need to put in the work and the story. And that involves going on a bunch of different social media, a bunch of different mainstream media, foreign media, as Bradley said, trade journals, you name it, right? Like the information is out there. It just takes some time to putting it all together. And even when you've got it put together, you think you've got the story, and you might, and you likely do, but you never know, right? It's tough. It's tough. Like once you do become red pilled, it's almost maddening because I don't know about you guys, but I spend a lot of my day just trying to make sense of the world. Whereas I when I was much more, what's the word? I'm ignorant to what the machine does and how the machine controls us. Before, when I was much more ignorant to all that, like, yeah, I had all the time in the world. Now, any free time I do have, I'm trying to read articles, I'm trying to watch videos, I'm trying to do all that stuff just to make sure that, what I think is going on in the world is true. And, that's what I do because that's who I am and how I am. And you guys are the same way, I'm sure. But it's a time commitment, and most people just can't afford that.
It's like there's that Russian saying, the free cheese can be found in a mousetrap. So sure, you can feel free to have whatever narrative you like for breakfast, but if you don't work for it, nothing worth it is free. You got to work for it. So
yeah. And I'm totally cool. Like if somebody wants to be, hey, politics, geopolitics, world events, that's not my thing. And I'm interested in sports and I'm interested in dumb comedies and whatever. Great. No problem. But if you are that person, you then can't come back and tell me everything that's wrong with Russia or everything that's wrong with Palestine or whatever the argument is, right? Like, you can't swallow the mainstream media lies and then, attack other people when they challenge it. That's what frustrates me.
Yeah. But I think also the other side of the coin is you can't not understand what the narratives are that are around you, even if it doesn't really quite make sense. Like, for example, even if it's in the West, Americans are taught to look at the world in a lens of good guys and bad guys. From a young age, from an early age, in any storybook, story, in any movie, in any cartoon, everybody knows there's a good guy and there's a bad guy. And that's sometimes the first question people ask, like, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? So we look at the world in that way. So being able to read our own propaganda and being able to understand where it is that we're coming from and what it is that we're trying to say, how we're trying to shoehorn real world events to fit these narratives can really help us dissect and sometimes pull back some of the layers of these narratives. When you say, for example, yeah. Go ahead, Shadowi.
I think for me, I'm going to say the global south or the rest of the world, the main date about this situation, about understanding who was the bad guy, who was the good guy, is 1999, the Kosovo War.
Yep.
For the Yugoslavia wars, the mainstream media made a very good job. I don't know what's happening really in Yugoslavia, in Serbia, and Bosnia, and so on, the Sarajevo event, and so on. I have no idea what's happened. I know a lot of things happened there, but who is guilty, who is not guilty? The mainstream media, you have to be a specialist to understand the situation. But what I know is that for the Kosovo War, it was really clear who was the bad guy. And I think that's the event that makes the difference for a lot of people about, oh, damn, the Western world is not so nice. That's the red pill event, like you said earlier, the Kosovo War in 1999. After that, for a lot of people at a certain level, the idea that the Western world was perfect was shattering.
That was my event. 99 was my event. I'll tell you that right now. I was living in Holland at the time. And I remember when the bombing started happening in Belgrade. And one of the higher ups, he was like a VP or something or other. And this was we worked like, it was maritime services and stuff. So we rented out tugboats and big cranes, like oil and gas related stuff, right? And this piece of trash comes to me one day and he's like, because, this was like 99. The internet still wasn't as much of a thing as what it became. And this old bastard comes to me and he's like, "Yes, young man, I'd like you to do some research for me on the port of Belgrade." And I was like, "Okay, cool. What do you need?" And he's like, "Well, once I'll never forget. He said this to me. He said, when this war is over, there's going to be a lot of money to be made in Belgrade. So we're going to need to know what the dimensions of the port, like the depths and stuff are. So we'll know so he was basically like, give them." So he said, "Can you contact the port and see if you can get some of this information for me?" And I was just like, "Oh yeah, sure." And meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, what a piece of trash you are, buddy. What an absolute piece of garbage you are.
Wow. That's
So yeah,
really
no. So yeah, 99, that was kind of my moment and I followed that conflict closely. Like I said, I was living there and I had a bad taste in my mouth about it. Before that day, I really didn't care about anybody in Yugoslavia, to be honest with you. But after that day, I was kind of like, those poor people, what are we doing to them? And it all snowballed from there. Next was 2003 with Iraq, and then you had Afghanistan and Libya, and you name it. Like, the comedy of errors just keeps going on and on and on. And it's been that way for 25 years now. Like, we haven't been successful at anything in 30 years.
Well, I think that
Or
probably
more than that.
it wasn't just you that looked at Yugoslavia and made certain conclusions, because what I can't help but to think is that the real turning point for the Russian relations with the West was probably Yugoslavia, more than Chechnya, more than Georgia. I think Yugoslavia was where they got it. Like, this is what they would love to do to us. They would do this to us,
I think
They
more
will find a
specifically
reason.
Kosovo than Yugoslavia, because the Yugoslavian situation was very delicate and there were a lot of stuff happening. But Kosovo, it was very clear who was the bad guy.
Well, I mean, let's say it's super clear that the Russians are the bad guys. That doesn't make it any less existential for the Russians to look at that and say, this is a practice run. So I think that was a turning point in Russian relations too with the West, because
99.
Yeah, I think so. Because after that we had Putin came to power in 99, I think, was it, or was it 2000?
I think he tried to solve the situation in 2001 when he asked the Bush to help him against Afghanistan and basically to be part of the Western world. That's what he asked.
Wait, that was later,
and
though.
The Western world refused him.
Yeah, that
At
was
this
late.
point, you understand, I'm never going to be with them. I'm going to be against them.
Yeah, well, okay, that's probably Vladimir Putin maybe had a little bit of his own journey. He was a little bit more of a Western man. He speaks fluent German. He had a relationship with, he lived there, blah, 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 right? I think that there's that, but there was also the Russian kind of military industrial complex, like the people around, the sort of people that, like, for example, Surovikin, that can look at a situation and say, this is what needs to be done. And even if we get, I don't even know what the political ramifications are. Those kinds of guys are looking around and they look at something like Yugoslavia and they're like, And even though Vladimir Putin maybe had certain overtures and he tried to do certain things, and maybe they thought they had some successes, I think that in general, after the was it 2007 or 2008 statements where the Russians were like, no, I think it was the Bush administration said that Georgia and Ukraine would be part of NATO, that and France and Germany
2007.
put the kibosh on that at the time. I think already at that point in time, the Russians were already saying like, yep, this is exactly like that guy said, who's been prepping, who's been getting ready. It's going to be inevitable. So I think around then was a turning point for a lot of things.
Well, if you want to believe the Russian folklore, the story so goes, as I've heard it anyway, is yes, absolutely 99 was a turning point, and that kind of woke Yeltsin up to the fact that Russia would never be accepted in the West. And Yeltsin also realized that he needed a successor who, quote, couldn't be bought, right? Like him, basically. So, if you listen to the Russian folklore, that's why Yeltsin picked Putin, because he knew that Putin effectively couldn't be bought, right? But yes, it was the 99 event that kind of woke everybody in the Russian leadership up to say, yeah, the likelihood of us, ever being integrated with the West is probably slim. They tried it. I mean, as Shadowi said, I mean, they certainly tried. Putin offered to help out in Afghanistan, offered to be part of NATO, join NATO. I mean, Russia tried and they got rebuffed. So eventually, Putin said, okay, well, if you want to swallow up Ukraine and Georgia and God knows what else, no means no. And it's been that way since 2008.
There is one thing I want to add. During the Syrian revolution in 2014, I began to follow a Prussian French guys. This guy was live in Moscow for since 2001. He's the husband of a Russian wife. He knows a lot of things about Russia. He worked for them. He done a lot of. He's very Russian. And he has a sentence in 2014 who for me was very important. He says that for the Western world, the sentence is if there is a war with Russia. For the Russian population is when there is a war with NATO. The Russian population in 2014 already understand there were going to be a war with NATO. And the war with NATO, for them, at least start in 2022.
Yep. Yeah, it was only a matter of time. They knew that.
And they know it. They knew it. Because at least I'm sure that nobody was understanding that a war with Russia, cold or hot, were going to happen. Nobody would believe that. Me first. At the beginning of the Ukrainian invasion, I was really surprised. For me, Putin was making a big mistake. It was not possible, but it happens.
The only thing,
I think at first I was surprised as well, but but I was in a position to understand kind of the build up for it and why the Russians felt like that it was inevitable. And with time, I sort of think that maybe it was inevitable. Like if they were not talking to the Russians and they were really going to go full forward, maybe they weren't, and that was an excellent way to get the Russians to invade, which would be genius of the Ukrainians if that's what they were doing. But the Russians thought so, and I think that maybe they thought that it's never going to be a better time. Sorry, go ahead, Nunyan.
Well, I think, and we talked about the reasons of what happened before, but I think really it all comes down to they only had one plan, and that was to economically cripple Russia. That was it. That was the plan. Remove them from SWIFT, and all of the Russian economy is going to crumble within a couple months. And all the countries of the world, because they don't want to be on the side of Russia, all the countries of the world are going to go along with it, and Russia's economy is going to crater. And then all we have to do is pick up the pieces. So as long as we've got, some forces in Ukraine to, take some bullets for, a few months, that's all we really need. Because after that, Putin's going to get kicked to the curb. We're going to get, EU friendly leaders in the Russian government. And then we're going to get our companies to come in and break it all up and take their resources. That was the plan. And I am well beyond shocked that they didn't have a better plan B. They
I
just,
think they
I think they had a plan B. The plan
What's
B
the-
for me, for NATO, it was a quick victory for Russia. And then they start the guerrilla system in Ukraine.
sure.
For me, it was a plan B. And the guerrilla in Ukraine was going to drain the money and the men of Russia in Ukraine. It was a
Yeah.
plan B for me.
Maybe.
But
Yeah.
the long war scenario, nobody, even in Moscow, think about it. In Moscow, they understand the situation only in June, I think. In June, they make the switch between, okay, it's not going to be a short war, it's going to be a long war. We need to
Right.
switch gears and to think differently.
Yeah,
But
agree.
before the June month, everybody was thinking about a short war. Even after that, in Europe, they continue to think about a short war.
I think they're
so
still thinking about it.
I think what happened. So I think what happened was, they plan A was economic sanctions will cripple the Russians. Plan B was maybe at the same time as, or alternatively, the Russians are going to overstep. They're going to be overstretched. We're going to fund the Ukrainian insurgency. We weren't offering the Ukrainians weapons like F-16s. We were offering them weapons like javelins, hit and run kind of stuff.
Insurgency weapon.
Yeah.
Right.
And then what happened was the Russians didn't do that. They did something completely different. They basically did this.
They tried to do that.
Well,
They tried to win in a few days, in a few months.
They did.
And
Well,
they
here's
failed.
what they did. They moved in and they bluffed Zelensky, scared him shitless, and they bluffed him into sitting at the negotiating table, right? Because we know that the very first day of the invasion, the Russians were trying to set up negotiations. On the third day, they had negotiations, right? And the Ukrainians were making overtures. They were saying, okay, fine, neutrality. So their plan half worked. But what happened was the Americans and Boris Johnson's, right, and people like that, they took a look at the situation. And remember how the Russian lines looked at that time? They were obviously way overstretched. They had like under 200,000 troops. They had people that were in pockets that were difficult to supply. There were all kinds of situations where the Russians were obviously about to be on the back foot, right? And what we thought is that we can hit them so hard that we're going to basically chomp at whatever that exposed huge thing is, and that's going to sufficiently cripple the Russian army that it's going to be sufficiently politically embarrassing that we're going to get everything. We're going to get Putin to be gone. And we could kind of see that reflected in the propaganda a little bit, where they're trying to talk a lot about Russian casualties, making that a focal point, the Wagner style of casualties. So there was a lot of that talk, because that was the gambles that they were hoping that would happen. And then the Russians, lo and behold, regrouped and buckled up and changed the war to whatever it is that we see it today. Go ahead.
I think two things first. The first one, I think that a lot of people, a lot of analysts and think tank in the Western world has been blinded by their own propaganda. The shovel, the mass wave attacks,
So crazy.
all these stupid things. The washing machine, for the chip processor chip, very stupid stuff. And that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think everybody, even in the Western world, they underestimate Zelensky. Zelensky made for his job an incredibly good job. He was basically the anchor, the earth of the resistance to Russia, and he made such a good job that he took with him everybody in the Western world. And it was really incredible to see this show. Basically, it was a show, and he wins the first part of the war, at least in the media. On the first 6 months, 1 year of the wars, it was the Zelensky show.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And nobody in the Western world, and in Russia too, has think about this kind of situation before the war. Before the war, the Ukrainian government should have collapsed in 2 weeks, in 1 week maybe.
Yeah, I think that it is important to note that Ukraine's successes on the propaganda front did change their prospects, did change the game for them to a large degree. Maybe to the point where they focused on it longer than they should have, because now there's not, the returns aren't the same. Sort of reminds me of this Russian joke. So Ivan and Nikolai, let's say Ivan and Nikolai are two soldiers. At the end of the war, the Russians won the war. The war is finished. They pull out a thing of vodka and they pour each other a shot. And Ivan's like, "Well, Nikolai, to the victory." And Nikolai is about to toast him, and then all of a sudden he gets really sad, and his face gets kind of like melancholy. And Ivan says, "What's wrong, Nikolai?" And Nikolai says, "Yeah, I mean, we won, but we lost the propaganda war."
I have a good one for you about this one. So it comes from the Tom Clancy book, What Storm. Two Russian Soviet tank general meet in Paris after winning the Third World War, and they ask themselves, the two tank general, "Oh, about the air war, who win it?"
About the what?
The air war.
The air.
They are tank generals, okay?
Yeah, got
and
it.
they ask who win in the air.
Got it.
Because for them there is so much air defense that they don't care what's happening
Exactly.
above them.
Well, and I think you're right. I think a lot of these leaders, they're buying into their own propaganda. And a lot of them, I'm not sure that they realize what's real and what's not anymore,
Oh, yes.
and that's a scary place to be. Like, if you don't know that Ukraine is getting decimated right now, you really need to recheck yourself, and particularly if you're a world leader.
Nunya, today it's too late. You had to
No.
understand the situation 1.5 years ago.
Mhm.
Basically, it was fall 2022 when you had to have a clear mind and to understand where are we going. Okay,
Sure.
the war is going to last. The Russian economy is not going to crumble. The world is changing. We have to do something. It was during the fall 2022 where the Western world had to switch gears.
Mhm.
And they miss it totally.
Yeah, but okay, I think that if you are listening to Melinda Herring and Michael McFaul, then it doesn't matter. Like, you get the bad advice away from you. That is bad advice. At least Victoria Nuland is no longer there, but she's out there. It was Yale or Stanford, I think Yale, teaching the next generation of students, along with the likes of Stephen Kotkin and what's his face. No, wait, that guy's not at Yale. I think he's at Stanford.
Well,
Beaver, but like, go ahead.
It's just, I just find it all very strange. Like, for some strange reason, the leaders of the West, and it's only the leaders of the West, because you talk to the rank and file people in any of these countries, all of ours included, none of us care about Ukraine. But for the leaders of the West, they've made this into an existential crisis for all of us. And for the life of me, I'll never know why. because, like I said, the majority of people can't find Ukraine on a map. Nobody cares about it. Yet, for some reason, we're supposed to go to war and risk being, vaporized
I don't know.
and have our economies ruined.
Would you say that it's a bigger deal to the Europeans? Shadowi, what do you think?
Sure, it is. Yes, I agree. But
I'm going to change the topics but with the link of the previous one. For me, it's at a point where if Trump really wanted to make peace in 24 hours, he could give Putin Odessa on the east side of the Dnieper River. And immediately he has peace. And in USA, who knows about Odessa?
right.
Nobody would care,
Nobody
except
cares.
for the 0.1001% of the US population.
Yeah.
You know what? You're so right. I never thought about that, but Putin...
And Putin would agree immediately. Odessa? Oh, thank you, guy. Odessa, Kharkiv, Cherniv, Sumy, everything.
I don't think he could do that. I don't think he's in a position to be able to give the Russians their land bridge to...
Oh, he could do what he wants, please. Hey, he give $10 million to the Odessa governors of the Oblast, Odessa Oblast, and it's solved. No, they could do that if they want.
I don't know. I don't think he's in a position to be able to just do whatever he wants.
What would be where you are right is that the US government is not going to allow him to do that. That you are right. But the USA, if they decided to do that, they could do it very easily.
It's the hubris. It's Western hubris. Like, we cannot admit a loss. That's all this is. That's all this is. Like, this could have been, as Shadowi said, this could have been over with 2 years ago. And it's not, because we simply cannot admit a strategic defeat. We cannot admit that we made a mistake. Right? But
I think the situation is
we're
different.
there.
2 years ago, we were winning in their own mind, okay? In their own mind. Today, they know they are losing.
Right.
It's totally different, because today they have to find a solution to basically cut their losses. It's not the same thing. When you are winning, you could wait because you are winning. But when you are losing, you have to stop very quickly. And then you have to accept to lose something. And that they are not able to do it. It's a very, very sad situation for them.
I think they don't want to hear "I told you so."
Well, I think that they think if they show weakness, it's going to create this big cascade effect. Like, if we show weakness on Ukraine and we show that Russia wins, therefore the global South is going to rush towards Russia. I got news for them. That's happening anyway.
Going to lose Taiwan. Don't forget Taiwan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're going to lose Taiwan because China's going to, all this nonsense, right? But I got news for them. They're losing all these places anyway, right? Because of their actions in Russia. Like, the world is de-dollarizing for a reason, right? And maybe this is a good segue to talk about the G20 for a little bit, but the world has kind of turned their backs on the West, on all of us, and we need to prepare ourselves for that, because
maybe not.
It's going to get worse.
Maybe turning its back is a little bit more definitive. Maybe they're not trying to turn their back as much as they're trying to create an alternative way for them to be able to. It's like the troublesome. If the troublesome party is the Americans, will they cut them out? That's all it is. You can still be part of these other economic blocks, right? It's not like you can't.
Like in South America. We could speak about South America. Just for the people listening to us, South America should have been the main topic of this.
Yeah, exactly. We were planning on speaking about South America, but speaking about the G20, that's already getting us on that subject already. But yeah. So I think that when you take a look at so the G20, right, that's the world's 20 biggest economies, and the G7, that's kind of like the top 7 of the world's biggest economies. That includes, supposedly it includes, the U.S., Japan, France, Germany, right? things like that. So it's top 7 countries supposedly economically.
Without Russia.
And China.
Well, it
And
used to
India.
be G8. Yeah, it used to be the G8 that included Russia, but then they threw a hissy fit, I think, over Crimea, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, and then it became the G7. But what people have taken to calling the to calling BRICS is the G20 minus the G7. Kind of an interesting way of thinking about it.
I recall the bullshit at the beginning of the war about the strength of economy of country. When they say that Russia has the same economy as Spain and France together.
Yeah.
When they just add the GDP without understanding what's happening behind the GDP. It was a very sad situation for me.
So
Well,
this is the reason why there's that reality is hitting the ground right now. We take a look at the South America. That's I think of South America as traditionally America's backyard. And I'm an American. I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with us trying to maintain a sphere of influence. Maybe that doesn't mean that I'm pro deposing Venezuela's Maduro, and like what did we do recently? We accepted the opposition guy that ran against him as the interim president, I think, or something like that. It's like we don't have to do that kind of crazy stuff, but I think that we should be able to offer them a genuinely better deal just by being in proximity with them.
But the problem is you do that kind of stuff and you don't offer them the kind of deals that they want, and that's why we are where we are, right? That South America has been ignored for 30 years, and that's why China's there now.
And before that, the US policy in South America was basically CIA policy. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see what they're panicking about, though. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to talk about the Chankay port. So you're seeing deals like this being announced all over the place. And this was a really big deal. It's a mega port that was built in a place called Chankay, Peru. Now, this is going to change the game in South America for shipping, because right now, basically all stuff that gets shipped out of South America, it has to go through the Panama Canal, then it has to go to Mexico, then it has to go to Long Beach, California, before it can go to Asia. With this port now, you're going to have goods flowing all over South America, up to Peru, and then straight over to Asia. It's going to cut the shipping times down, I believe, from what I recall, from 35 days on average down to 23. So that's a pretty big deal. It's a fully automated port. Check it out on YouTube. It's pretty cool to see. Like everything there, cranes and everything, it's all automated. So it's kind of neat. Now, the other thing that I read just yesterday to go with this port, another thing that the Chinese are working on with the Brazilians and the Bolivians is a railway going from Atlantic to Pacific. So that's going to run through Bolivia and Brazil, and then that'll link up to this port.
Look what the AP is saying, right? Of course, the AP. They have destroyed and appropriated part of the sea. This is their intent. This is what I mean about propaganda. You should be able to read the AP and understand what they're going to say, because where are they coming from? They're coming from China is encroaching upon our, pseudo colonies. You can't do that.
Well, everything I read is the people in Peru were thrilled because this is going to create
drugs.
Yeah, no, this is going to create all sorts of jobs, and there was nothing in that town before this port. So this is the kind of development that you want to see. You don't want to see development that's tied to rainbow children. You want development that sees tangible results.
Dude, this is awesome. This is what they're focusing on. The story, according to AP, is the naughty Chinese are going to increase human trafficking. They're here to increase human trafficking, appropriate the sea, destroy the sea. They have come in all kinds of poor fish, all kinds of crazy shit's going to happen to them. And all in the name of human trafficking. Many things, more bad than good. You can always find somebody to say that. Sorry. Anyway, go ahead, Shadowi.
I want to add two things. We have to be very careful about the idea that the train could replace the ship for the shipping of freight. It's a big mistake. Don't never forget these numbers. 100 trucks is one train. 100 trains is one ship.
Mhm.
So what I mean is that you cannot put all the shipping from South America through this port with train. It's not possible. The ship are going to continue to use Panama canals, to use the south side, the south Detroit in the South America. They are going to continue to do that. What is going to offer is a backup plan, but a very, very expensive backup plan, because to replace one ship with 100 train is very, very expensive. And you have to have a very strong railroad system to do that. Just for one ship. If you have 100 ships, and I think there is more than that, if you look at the real-time GPS system available on the internet, you cannot replace them by train. Never forget that. The sea is still the main transportation for shipping in the world. But second things, yes, of course, it's important, but a port is a local thing, or it could be useful for countries who don't have a seaside or a large river or canal who go to the sea. For them, it's really important to have this port.
So I have this
So
kind of
for
question.
Bolivia, I think it's very important.
I don't know.
For Bolivia.
Maybe you guys would know better than me. Maybe you guys can tell me if I'm think that this is a stupid idea. But I'm wondering that maybe possibly it might not be potentially a way to avoid U.S. tariffs on certain things. So maybe you can't sell Baidu cars in America, but you don't have to import them from China. What if you import the raw materials from China? You have a Baidu factory there, and then you ship that stuff up to the United States. Would that avoid tariffs?
They are already doing that in Mexico. In Mexico, you have a economic free zone where there is already a lot of Chinese company building factory, and it's just 100 kilometers of the border with USA.
So that does work then. So you do avoid tariffs by
You avoid a lot of
because of the what is it? Not NAFTA
Don't
anymore.
forget that Mexico is in the free trade area of USA.
Yeah, it's not NAFTA anymore. It's something else now, right? It's something I forgot what it is. But yeah, there's a new one, but it's basically NAFTA plus.
You avoid a lot of issue.
Yeah, so exactly. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking things that, for example, have a massive tariff, like for example, Baidu cars, or something else like that. I mean, here they're talking about like, oh my goodness, I will be able to sell my artisanal freaking handcrafted llamas, and people will love them, and I will be rich. Look at this stuff. It's not like all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all of it's going to just be made in China.
Everything like that come from China or Vietnam or a country like that.
Exactly. It'll be 1/16 of the price. It'll be made in China. Everybody's going to have one. You're going to be completely out of a job. You're just going to be standing there like a Walmart. And nobody can, I will be able to sell my llamas. Okay, well, good luck with that. Tell me how it goes. Tell me how that goes for you. I don't know. CGTN. Of course, it's CGTN, right? So continuing on the earlier theme of like, you got to know what it is, and what is CGTN going to do? They're going to focus exactly on the opposite of what AP focused on, right? They're going to be telling you all about like, hey, my goodness, you know what? Fruits. We will be buying fruits. Imagine. They know that that's going to, that sounds pretty harmless.
I think
sounds
this
pretty
port
innocuous.
is mainly to export produce from South America to China.
It is impressive. This is quite impressive. Look at this.
Yeah, what you're going to see coming out of this port, as Shadowi said, a whole lot of fruit and food, and also minerals coming from places like Bolivia.
If they are smart, and I see the Chinese are smart, they are going to continue to invest in the local infrastructures to basically create from scratch a new market for their own product. Basically, what they want is in 10 years to be able to sell them laptop, smartphone, electric cars, and so on. But to sell electric cars, you first need to sell them a nuclear power plant. And they are going to do that.
No, they're
Well,
they're doing it the right way. I mean, like I said, South America's been ignored for so long, and any investment that they have had has all been crooked investment, which goes nowhere. So this is the type of tangible stuff that South America needs for sure.
Yep.
yeah, it's
You know.
going to a completely just having a model that's different than the WEF model of like theft. Basically they're stealing your shit. That's all it is. Even just being fair, making a fair deal. Like I know that people on DPO open mic like have complained. Oh well, some of the Chinese infrastructure, it's not as good as the infrastructure that the Soviets built for the Africans. It's like, okay, well, whatever. You know what? It's better than it's better than being bombed for your shit. Roads that are a little bit crappy, just maintain that shit. I think that's
And
much
there
better.
is another thing that's important. Basically, I'm sure they are doing the same thing that they did in Africa. The Western world, when they want to invest in Africa or in some places, somewhere else in the third global
Well,
world,
especially
they
France.
give
You're
money
French.
to the government. They give money to the government, and they wait for him to create what they need. China does things very differently because they know about corruption in China. So they build the things and give the finished product to the government. They never give cash directly to the government
Right.
because give cash to the government is going to disappear.
Yeah. Exactly. And
Yeah.
Even
but
if
it's
the project is a failure, at least the power is built.
Yeah, well, they're playing Go, right? That's what people always say. That if the Russians are playing chess and the Americans are playing poker, the Chinese are playing Go. This is a real Go move.
well, the other thing that you're seeing a lot more of, it's not just the economic, like in this geopolitical chess, they're winning on the economic side, that's clear. But also on the military side, like I've been reading a lot about how, for example, well, Venezuela obviously is the black sheep, according to the Americans, and both China and Russia have increased their military ties with Venezuela in the last several years. And I was reading just the other day that Bolivia and China signed a military deal as well. So, I think that, you're starting to see the Chinas and the Russias of the world become more assertive. And that's the right to be so. And the countries down in South America more more willing to align with them. So I think we're going to probably see more of that as well because the countries down there know what they're dealing with the United States, and they know the trickery that goes on. So, Venezuela is a perfect example. A few years ago, I would have put the likelihood of Venezuela being invaded pretty high. Now, I don't see it, you know? So I think that's sort of where the wind is blowing.
I have a lot to say about that. Go ahead, Shadowi. I'll speak after you.
Yes, about the Chinese weapon and the military influence. In Serbia, the most modern anti-air system come from China. Basically, they couldn't buy Russian S-300 for obvious reason in Serbia, so they bought the Chinese one. And to deliver them, China has created a huge air bridge with military transport aircraft, 50 of them. And it was something very new for Western country because for them only Aeroflot, for the Russian Aeroflot and the US, they have a special division for the logistic aircraft in US Army, could do that. And suddenly China could put together 50 military transport aircraft and transport a whole as the size of the country, a whole air system defense in one country in 1 week. And it was a shock for NATO, but it happens. And I'm pretty sure they are doing the same thing in some other place in the world.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah, I look at this like maybe I'm overthinking it, but I know at one point in time on one of the open mics, Big Ari and I had a really almost a violent disagreement about this. But it feels like maybe the Russians, and to a lesser or a certain different extent, the Chinese are sort of reserving and slowly ramping up their options of asymmetric escalation with the Americans in places, not just in wherever they're vulnerable. And when you have something like the Venezuelans being happy to buy Su-30 jets, even the Egyptians weren't allowed to buy Su-30 jets. And the Russians can sell them to the Iranians, oh my goodness. These are asymmetric escalations in a way. I think that the Russians going out there and selling rocket technology to the North Koreans, I think that's an escalation. I think that the Americans look at that as a direct threat, as a reason why they want to win the war so badly. Go ahead, Shadowi.
I think you are making a mistake. For you, the main drive behind this kind of decision for the Chinese government is political. For me, it's a mistake. The main drive behind this kind of decision is about money. That's why it's working. What China wants is not to have a political advantage to the West against the West world. What they want is just to make more money. And they want people on site in Venezuela, in Peru, everywhere, to make more money.
I think they are also
they are never speaking about politics.
I think they're not only shrewd.
We have no problem with that. On your Shining Port, you want USA chip inside? No problem with that.
Yep. I agree with Shadowy 100%. And this is
about politics, about ideology, about everything bullshit like that. That's business. That's all.
This is where we in the West, we get it so wrong, because Shadowy's absolutely right. Like, if you talk to anybody in India, anybody in China, anybody in Asia, really, all they care about is making business, making more money so that they can do better for their families or their companies or whatever it may be. Like, the end goal is, how do we be successful? How do we make more money? Everything else is superficial to that. And for some strange reason in the West, we haven't figured that out. Like, we put all of these kind of social wars and all this other nonsense in our foreign policy that has no belonging there.
I think that's where you're wrong, Nanya. I think we have figured that out, and that is why we provide people, sports and horse races and horse race politics and stories about Taylor Swift.
What does that have to do with foreign politics?
Because we understand the issues that actually matter, and we don't want people to be just sitting around. What is that George Carlin skit where he's like, the last thing they want is for a couple of guys to be sitting around the kitchen dinner table talking about how hard they're getting fucked,
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, you're right. Do they know how badly they're fucking everybody? Sure.
Yeah.
But do they think about that in their foreign policy decisions vis-a-vis other countries? No. I
don't mean that. I mean the stories, but yeah.
But that's Shadowy's point. When you talk to a Chinese diplomat or whatever, it's like, how do we find a mutually beneficial outcome here where we're all successful?
Win-win. Yeah. Win-win.
Or let's be honest, more money for everybody, but at the very least, more money for us. That's all they care about, right?
They're not going to do that. They are diplomats,
Right. But I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's where negotiation comes in.
And that's why it's working.
Yeah. And that's why it's working, right? Because, again, people see tangible benefits. The people in Peru are now like, hey, there's a port here now, and it used to be nothing. and my brother is going to be working at that port making uber thousands of dollars or whatever it is, going to have a better quality of life, yada, yada, yada. That's what they see. That's tangible. But when you talk about tying your foreign aid to, the country's ability to,
Produce food.
or no, we tie it to your ability to accept transgender people and nonsense like that. And it just turns everybody off. And that's why you see China eating our lunch now. Because the people are sick of the crap. They just want to see tangible benefits. That's why, like, you talk about the G20, they were talking about the climate change initiatives. And the Global South, rightfully so, has basically said, you know what? We've been listening to you clowns for the last 30 years almost. Tell us about all the money you're going to give us. TikTok, where is it? And that's basically where they're at now. They're like, you can't talk to us about climate change until you start cutting some checks. Otherwise, we're not going to hear it. And what are we going to do? Cut them a check? Of course we're not. We don't have any money. So, people are sick of the talk. They just want to see
And
action.
China is going to win the climate war because
Of
they are
course.
not going to win it because they are going to sell to make politics. They are going to make deal. They are
Yep.
going to sell nuclear power plant, the new system with molten salt and the thorium system, or they are going to sell solar panel and things like that. That's how they are going to win. But they are
Yep.
going to make deal. They are going to sell you something not because it's a green ideology, but because it's useful for you.
Right,
Okay,
right,
solar panel is a good idea for your farm. I don't
right.
care about the green effect and so on.
Yep.
Okay, you need a solar panel, so I'm going to sell you one. That's all.
Yep, that's it. That doesn't have to be any more difficult than that, right? Oh, you need fertilizer? Here you go. We sell fertilizer, or we sell solar panels, or we
And
sell cars, or
the price
yeah.
of oil is increasing. No problem. We have electric vehicle, a lot of them.
Yep.
And that's
I
how
mean,
they solve the issue.
you read about these car companies. Like just today, Ford announced that they were laying off 4,000 in Europe, and then Stellantis announced that they were freezing production at one of the Italian plants. Like and they talk about overcapacity in Chinese cars.
Do you know
Meanwhile,
where
the
in Europe
combustion
it was?
engines,
Do you have any idea where in Europe?
Germany. The Ford plant, what Ford was in Germany, and then Stellantis was in Italy.
And suddenly the power is very expensive in Germany.
Right.
And we all know why.
Yep.
Mhm.
So if Ford cannot afford to buy to build their car in Germany anymore.
Well, they can build it, but that's a Ford you can't afford.
Yep.
So looking at look at how the different, like, it's just interesting to see how this is probably one of the few things, like, you don't see this kind of a debate over the Russia-Ukraine stuff, but like, look, this is just me. I just looked at Peru port on YouTube, right? So, and you can already tell NBC News, what are they going to talk about? Port largely funded by China. And of course, they're going to be critical of it because it's NBC,
Well, because we're failing, and you've got the mainstream media, which is basically a government mouthpiece. And again, it's give them bread and circuses, distract them from the fact that, everything's crumbling around them. And if there is a success story, we need to paint it some way to make it not look like it's a success story. This is propaganda 101, and I'm so sick of it. Like, we get this fed to us daily, every day. And, you can just look at the title of this and see right through it after a while,
But I have a thing for you. In Greece, the main port in Athens is built by China. Has been built by China. It was what, 15 years ago?
Yep.
15 years ago, and nobody cares today. And I'm
Yep.
pretty sure that some part of the Ukraine war supply has transit with this port. Because if you don't want your shipping to cross the Dardanelles Channel and the Istanbul Channel, you have to go to this port. So a lot of our suppliers go through there. And nothing happened. It's just a port.
Exactly. Right. It's literally a platform. That's it.
But like,
You know.
look at Associated Press.
They are just doing
Associated
business.
Press is completely since Bucha. I can't believe this is the same Associated Press I grew up reading. What do they say? Take a look at this. Number one, what do we need to know about this port? The Associated friggin' Press. Okay. They have
Again,
destroyed
government mouthpiece.
this
Right.
inappropriate part of the sea. But like, okay, they were supposed to be like by far better than something like BBC. Nowadays, I'd say both of them are completely
Useless.
useless.
Yeah, they're propaganda.
Beyond useless. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have destroyed an appropriate part of the sea. Next.
And what is very sad is they've destroyed their own reputation. BBC for at least 1 century was something very special in the world.
Yeah.
During World War II, they have earned
Mhm.
a reputation.
Yeah.
Okay? And this reputation, they have destroyed it in what, 20 years?
Yep.
It's a very sad thing.
I think they really, really, really blew it on COVID-19, Ukraine war. I think over those two things, they really blew it.
Yes. It's the accelerator. History accelerator, the war. Always the same story. It accelerates everything. Even
Those
the
ones are.
loss of confidence in the mainstream
Well,
media.
the thing about COVID is we all know somebody who hasn't been the same since they took that damn vaccine, right? You want, it's hard to find somebody who doesn't know somebody like that or isn't somebody themselves. So yeah, they lost all sorts of credibility over that.
Look, they find some fishermen that are like, oh my gosh, I got to go further out to find my fish, and they dedicate this much of the stuff. This is what the story is about. You see, there was once upon a time there was a poor fisherman.
I would like it to try to fish, to do fishing in near the Boston port or the New York port, just for fun.
Right.
Yeah,
It's the same thing.
Once upon a time,
port, you have the same issue.
Let's call him Pablo. Pablo the fisherman was barely making it to be able to feed his family. See, like he can't afford one of those fancy ass motorboats. He has to row his cash every day. And then one day, the evil Chinese, you see, you already know who the bad guys are. Obviously, look at this. Look at this. Dun, 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 dun. You could make this some kind of DreamWorks feature film.
I'm sure if you are looking for the chips, there is one of them from USA.
Landed there, and they started to kill off all the fish. They destroyed an appropriated part of the scene. They said, hello, old man.
We all agree.
No longer. This is our
A lot of these ships are going to USA.
Well, anyway, they're going to the USA. All of this is completely distracting us from the important part here. You know, like I don't know if there's any music here, but
and his name is Julio, not Pablo. But
there is not. Okay. At least there's not music here. So basically, oh my gosh, some issues with fish. More ominous kind of looking shots, right? Like, it's going to increase human trafficking and drugs. This is what you need to know about this port. It is here to increase human trafficking and drugs.
I'm pretty sure there is a lot of police who is going to be there, a lot of custom official too, because taxes. So I'm sure there is not going to be a lot of criminals, or at least not the same one. Not the same one. There is going to be other criminals, huh?
Okay, you know what?
There's serious, but not the same one.
If you have more people, there will be more crime. It will happen.
Yes, and the port is a special.
And you know what? You know what? Maybe there will be a nice apartment complex that is built, and you can't afford to live there. Of course, all of these things are relevant, important issues to be talking about, but that's not why the Associated Press is bringing this up, right? The Associated Press is upset.
It's propaganda.
Yeah, I have a question for you. How many people have viewed this video?
Have viewed it? Let me see. How do I see that shit?
54 comment.
10,000 views. 10,908.
10,000. Oh, okay. 10,000 views. 11,000 views, and it was posted in November 14.
Look at the Jensen video about China. You know with Jensen, I think.
Who's?
Jensen. Jansen. He's a
G-A,
YouTuber with a lot of video about China. He's a pro-Chinese guy.
Jensen China? You just type in China?
G-A-N-S-O-N.
G-A-N?
Yes, but not G comme garden. Sorry, I say my French. The G comme Julia.
Oh, J?
J, sorry. J, yes.
J, then what?
J-A-N-S-E-N.
Jensen? China.
China.
Right?
I'm
Let's
pretty sure
see.
you know him.
Ooh, I've definitely seen this guy around before.
Yes, look at
He's,
how many videos he has.
okay, so let's
How
see. This
many
came
followers
out.
people have watched this video, for instance?
This video has 1
Okay, now you
million
understand. I don't.
views.
AP is nothing.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. The AP is allowed to be put on Wikipedia as a source. You're allowed to use that. You're allowed to cite them. Who's this? You're not allowed to cite or use this guy. That's why the alternative media revolution is kind of like, part of it is a rejection in a large degree of what people call the rejection of institutions. Because I mean, this is much better journalism. It's much more on the ground journalism than a lot of news that I read about China. Look, he is
speak
there.
With Chinese people.
Exactly.
Well, and this is what I was saying at the very beginning. You can't ignore what your own eyes see. And this is where everybody's getting their media from now. They're consuming podcasts, they're consuming YouTube, people like this guy. They're looking at X, they're looking at Telegram. So when this guy is saying, hey, this is what China's looking like, and hey, by the way, it's because I'm here, it's kind of hard for me to disregard what I'm seeing. And that's the problem.
Look at this
media has.
That's cool. Yeah. That is fucking cool. That is
badass. That this is the problem that the mainstream media has. They're irrelevant now. Nobody cares about what Associated Press says. Like you said, 10,000 views. They're irrelevant. So they can be upset that nobody's listening to what they have to say. That's fine. People will just continue to not listen to what they have to say.
Let's look at a more recent one, 9 days ago. How many views does it have? 352,000 views 9 days ago. Look at that.
Yeah, so
16 minutes. And this is just him talking. It's not like he's like talking about. He's just talking about like stocks and stonks and stuffs. U.S. is going in the wrong direction. Oh wow. Is it that obvious? You can see it all the way from China. Damn. Maybe it's more obvious from China. Maybe it's harder to see the forest for the trees. For a lot of our leaves, I don't know. But I don't know. It looks like we are approaching an hour and a half. So I guess we do need to wrap it up. We were not able to hit all of the different things that we wanted to hit.
About South America, but not a lot.
Yes. But we had to hear from you. We had to hear your red pill moment and stuff. That's always an interesting subject. So
hey, did you save that video clip I said about the volcano?
The volcano? No.
Don't worry about it then. For the 2 scoops.
Damn. Okay.
It's all
guys,
good.
Next time we'll have to give you guys 2 scoops of crazy. We'll have to give you 4 scoops of crazy next time. So we owe it. But yes, it was awesome to have Shadowi on. I really enjoyed it. Have a more European perspective. I guess anything else? Anybody got anything else to add to that?
No. I hope the situation is going to. I just really hope that Trump is going to succeed to make the peace in 24 hours in Ukraine, but we both know it's bullshit.
We all can hope that. Even if you don't like Trump, now that he's president, you gotta hope that he has the most success that he can.
At least he shows the world that the woke revolution is over. Mm-hmm. For me, it's the main idea behind the Trump election.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see, Trump and the United States be a bit more introspective and focus on some of their domestic issues, such as the border. and stay out of everybody else's business, quite frankly. And I think that's what the majority of the world wants. So,
And
but
deal
yeah,
about
Shadowy,
economic issue, not about societal issue.
exactly. But
Yep.
no, thanks very much for coming on, man. Appreciate your perspective as
It
always.
was
And
very fun for me.
Yeah, it was awesome. All right, guys, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. Bye-bye.